PowerToys is free and open source, with a growing collection of Windows utilities. That sounds useful, until every new shortcut and background tool becomes one more thing to remember. So I tested 7 utilities on bounded, everyday tasks. I checked the output, recorded setup friction, and rejected anything that did not earn a permanent place. 4 earned it. 3 did not. This is not a feature tour. Every utility gets one specific job and one observable result. A file tool has to produce the correct files. A window tool has to change the actual window state. A reference tool has to recognize the foreground app and return useful information. The verdicts are keep, situational, or disable. Keep means recurring value with little noise. Situational means it works, but I would activate it only for a specific job. Disable means it failed this test or did not justify staying available. This is one machine, one PowerToys version, and a short test window. Your work may lead to different winners. All on-screen files are synthetic, and the original PowerToys settings are restored after testing. First, PowerRename. The test folder contains 10 dummy files with inconsistent capitalization, spaces, underscores, and duplicate style suffixes. The goal is simple. Convert the names to lowercase and replace every run of spaces or underscores with a hyphen. One regular expression handles the separators, and the lowercase formatting button handles capitalization. The important part is the preview. PowerRename shows every proposed result before touching the disk, so a bad pattern is visible before it becomes a cleanup job. After applying the rule, all 10 file names match the requested format. It does not pretend to understand meaning. The parentheses around duplicate numbers remain. That is a useful limitation. PowerRename is excellent at deterministic transformations, but the human still owns the rule. 10 out of 10 outputs verified. For anyone who regularly receives exports, screenshots, or client files, this earns keep. Next, image Resizer. I generated 5 PNG images at 1920 by 1080 and asked PowerToys to create 800 by 450 copies. The batch completed in 783 seconds on this machine. More important than speed, every output was inspected programmatically, and all 5 reported exactly 800 by 450 pixels. The originals remained available, and the resized copies went into a separate test folder. This solves a repeated, boring task with almost no cognitive load. It is not a replacement for a full image editor, and compression quality still matters for production work. But for making consistent web copies or preparing a batch of screenshots, it does exactly what it promises. 5 correct files, 1 short operation, no repair. Keep. Shortcut guide is less dramatic, but it solves a real problem. Keyboard shortcuts are useful only if you remember them. With a synthetic notepad file in the foreground, I opened the guide using Windows, Shift, and question mark. It recognized Notepad and displayed contextual groups for file operations, editing, search, tabs, and windows. It also separated Windows and PowerToys shortcuts in the sidebar. The result was relevant to the active app, readable, and did not pull unrelated content into the captured window. An expert may outgrow it, but even experienced users forget application-specific shortcuts because it appears only when requested. Leaving it enabled creates very little noise. Correct context, useful reference, low overhead. Keep. FancyZones gets a 3-window layout on a 1920 by 1080 display. I used the priority grid layout with 3 zones and 16 pixels of spacing. The editor made the structure obvious, and the active layout was verified through the PowerToys configuration interface. This is the kind of tool that pays off through consistency, rather than one spectacular time saving. A browser, editor, and reference window can return to the same arrangement without repeatedly dragging borders. There is setup cost, and a complex layout can become its own form of clutter. The winning configuration here is deliberately small. 3 zones, 1 screen, 1 repeatable purpose. The layout applied correctly, and the simplest version is likely to save effort every week. Keep. Awake is designed to keep the computer from sleeping without changing the Windows power plan. For a safe test, I ran it with a 5-second time limit and with the display option disabled. The process exited successfully with code 0 after 77 seconds. The small difference includes startup and shutdown overhead, and the Windows power plan was not modified. So it works, But this is exactly why the verdict needs a third category. Awake is valuable during a long export, download, presentation, or remote task. It is not something I need running as a permanent habit, and an unlimited session could waste power if forgotten. Use it with a time limit when the job requires it. Situational. Always on top pins one window above the others with Windows, Control, and T. I tested it on a synthetic notepad window and checked the actual Windows extended style, not just the visual border. Before the shortcut, the topmost flag was false. After the shortcut, it was true. After toggling again, it returned to false. The original state was restored. That is a clean pass for reliability. It is useful for a calculator, a reference note, or a small status window while working elsewhere. But accidental pinning is confusing, and most windows do not need permanent priority. The utility works, the need is occasional. Situational. Color Picker had the most interesting failure. The input is a generated brand card with a known bright cyan line. I positioned the picker directly over that line without clicking, so the clipboard was not changed. The visible sample was cyan, but the picker displayed 000000, which is black. That is not a close miss, it is the wrong result. This could be specific to the graphics or capture environment on this machine, so I would retest after an update or on different hardware. But the rule for this episode is simple. A measurement tool that returns the wrong measurement does not earn trust because its feature list looks good. Failed known color check. Disable on this machine. The 4 permanent winners are PowerRename, Image Resizer, Shortcut Guide, and FancyZones. Awake and Always on Top are useful on demand. Color Picker failed the known color test and stays out until it passes a retest. The broader lesson is not to enable every PowerToy. Start with a repeated task, define what success looks like, and keep only the utility that removes more friction than it creates. If you want to run the same test on your own setup, use a 5-step checklist. First, write down the exact task before opening the settings page. Second, use dummy files or a reversible window so the experiment cannot damage real work. Third, define the pass condition in advance. The right dimensions, the right file name, or the right window state. Fourth, verify the output instead of trusting the animation or success message. Finally, restore the starting state and decide whether the utility deserves permanent attention or only an occasional shortcut. Do not rank everything by seconds saved. PowerRename and Image Resizer produce countable outputs, while FancyZones pays back through consistency. Awake and Always on Top passed their technical tests, but still remained situational. A useful scorecard measures correctness, repeat value, setup friction, and the cost of remembering one more tool. If you use PowerToys differently, share the one utility that has to stay enabled and the exact job it performs. That gives us a better next test than a generic list of favorites. Tested tools, fewer clicks, better work.